most people hear of racial conflict between black and white people in the United States, they think of the often violent civil rights movement in the South during the 1960s. Unfortunately, racial conflicts in the country did not end there. In the summer of 1974, District Court Judge Arthur W. Garrity declared that the Boston Public Schools had deliberately participated in school segregation, something that had been illegal since the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education ruling. He immediately ordered the desegregation of schools, which involved busing white students from Dorchester to the predominantly black Roxbury, and vice versa. Thus began a period of protests, violence, and racism in the once relatively accepting Boston community. Today, we will trace the events that occurred during the fight against busing in Boston.
After declaring the Boston Public Schools had been participating in illegal activity, Judge Garrity began Phase 1 of his plan. This involved redistricting, in which the highest population of blacks and the highest population of whites at separate schools would be bused to different schools. Garrity decided the junior class from South Boston would be bused to Roxbury. Half of the sophomores would have to go to Roxbury, and the seniors could decide what school to attend. This was greeted by much opposition by the school committee. In addition to students, it was declared teachers would also be moved to different schools. On September 3rd, 2 black teachers assigned to the white South Boston High School were harassed by other teachers following meetings. One white teacher held an empty pellet gun up to a black history teacher, Wayne Martin, and stated, "Bang, you're dead." At a rally on September 9th, Senator Ted Kennedy took the stage in favor of the new busing and was nearly attacked by the crowd. School had not even begun, and severe racist mood had spread throughout Boston.
But aside from the 2 senators, there was another man who was the subject of placards, Judge W. Arthur Garrity, Jr. The general consensus was that Garrity deserved to be hanged. A new touch was the abundance of tea bags, apparently to signify that the demonstrators were in the same vein as those who tipped the tea into the harbor. There were American flags, and of course there were special T-shirts. He knew he was in hostile territory, but never before had Kennedy been met with such a reception in Boston. He was booed.
On the first day of school, September 12, 1974, a bus transporting black students to South Boston was greeted by 200 to 300 white protesters. They threw rocks through the windows and yelled racial slurs at the students. The violence escalated so much that 9 students had to go to the hospital. A white group called ROAR, Restore Our Alienated Rights, opposed this movement and called for a 2-week school boycott. This cut the attendance in half. At one point, only 20 white students arrived for school one day in Roxbury. Out of 4,000 students, only 321 black students, 50 white students, and 11 other minority students attended school. 5 city school buses were so damaged they could no longer be in operation.
On the second day of school, the situation worsened. Over 300 white people gathered in South Boston and started throwing rocks at buses. One black student riding in a window seat was severely injured when a rock thrown shattered the glass. On this day, South Boston High School headmaster William Reed reported astonishingly low attendance.
At this point, several spiritual, educational, and other leaders in the city called for peace, yet the violence only intensified. Specific examples include a black MBTA bus driver being stoned, 300 white youth invading the Andrew Square MBTA station and assaulting black youth, and a fight in Hyde Park. Boston Public Schools was forced to shut down for a whole 2 days.
By October, thousands marched through the streets of Boston in protest. Several government members, such as Councilwoman Louise Day Hicks and U.S. Representative Raymond Flynn, joined the protests. Judge Garrity was forced to order biracial parents' committees who were supposed to look into these racial problems. These committees were comprised of 6 white, 6 black, 1 Hispanic, and 1 Asian parent. By October 7th, a Haitian American is brutally attacked in South Boston, and by October 9th, President Ford gets involved. He stated he disagrees with the busing but tells citizens to comply with the law.
Longer safe.
People of color are not safe to come here to Boston, and we're asking people across the country of color to stay away. Further, we issue a call for all persons of color to band together, for it is now that this bizarre situation of outright racism in Boston must stop. And we must come to the realization that if Boston state officials will not protect us, we must ask for federal protection.
The violence continues and escalates even further when on December 11th, a white student is stabbed at South Boston High School. By February, Garrity wanted to create a new plan, but a lawsuit is leveled against him after over 300 deadly weapons are found in schools. The U.S. federal court announced they may begin an investigation regarding violation of civil rights. Over the next several months, there were marches in Washington opposing the busing. In April, the new superintendent of schools, Marian Fahey, announced her intention to put more women and black people in charge of the school system.
Finally, on May 10, 1975, Judge Garrity announced his new plan. He decided there would be 8 new neighborhood districts with 2,100 students of mixed race. Each student would be assigned to a school in their district and then bused to that school. The longest ride that was allowed was to be 2.5 miles. After this, 1,000 ROAR members picketed through the city. By June, civil rights hearings were being held.
At the start of the next school year, there was only a 50% attendance rate. Violence ensued, teachers went on strike, students boycotted, there was even more trials, and the pattern just continued. Garrity called for new teacher hirings, and in November 1977, the first black member of the school committee was elected since 1895. His name, John O'Brien. In 1980, Garrity ordered 12 schools to close because they did not meet racial guidelines. Finally, in 1985, Garrity withdraws from the schools.
While Judge Garrity was certainly the star of the show during this time, the Boston mayor also played a key role in the events. It may seem clear as to what Mayor Kevin White's views were from his name. Throughout the whole Boston busing situation, he never committed to the support of one side. He was thought to be a strong, controlling leader with the crowds in his early political career, but during the Boston busing situation, he became weak and struggled to keep his power. For political reasons, White initially stated there would be no busing in the city while he is mayor, to relate to the white majority of voters in the city. As the riots and busing situation exploded, Mayor White grew more quiet with his opinions and lost more and more support from city citizens. White believed it was important to establish a federal presence to gain more control of the city for safety. The federal government denied this request and any federal involvement. White did not share his opinions on these momentous events, showing his fear. White kept quiet and irrelevant during these questionable and confusing times to stabilize his political standing, but in the long run, his mistakes ruined him.
Over the course of 11 years, Boston saw what may be the most violence it has ever seen. Many students and teachers were injured, many students moved to private schools, and most importantly, many students were robbed of time in their education. This is something no one should ever have to face. Racism in this form is horrific, and this should be a lesson to the world of what not to do.